Let's talk about the 7 steps to success. You ready to go, Larry? Yeah, awesome. Step number 1, finding deals. We're going to be talking about that a little bit later on today. How many of you have gotten out in the marketplace already and taken some steps in that direction toward finding commercial deals? Okay, so most of you. That's great. Step number 2, developing the ability to take a property and do what we call a quick review. Bob, how long does it take you to do a quick review of a property? About 10 minutes. About 10 minutes. One of the things that you'll see, especially with commercial, is that someone who's not familiar with looking at a lot of properties and knowing that it's just one of thousands of commercial properties that any of us could invest in out there, is they'll spend way too much time going through and analyzing and comparing and looking at things, when once you get down to understanding some of the basic formulas, we're going to go through some of those here this morning. I know some of you have been using those for a number of years, so it'll be a good review for you. If you are well versed in some of the formulas, we're going to ask you to step up and help mentor some of the other people. Maybe you are just getting a start, getting comfortable with those formulas here this morning, so you have a chance to do that. But the ability to take the initial information from a property and go through it and give it a quick look to say, is this thing even in the ballpark? In our Platinum group, we look at deals all the time. Our goal in the Platinum group is to buy large properties and to do it in a fun environment where we work together as a team. And we look at properties where they're asking $8.1 million. And we do the quick review, and the quick review shows that it's worth like 2.6. And we've, in this marketplace, been going out and offering letters of intent at 2.6. One property I'm thinking of where they'll never accept that. And well, we kept following up, and over a period of about 6 or 8 months, they went from laughing at us to talking to us. So, but if you don't have the ability to do a quick review and see where you're at, you could end up spending way too much time on a property, where they're not flexible or they're never going to come down to earth as far as their pricing goes. And there's a lot of situations out there like that. People paid too much for properties. They're getting in situations where they can't refinance those properties. Something's going to happen, and sometimes it's a matter of where the property's just not worth what they owe on it, and ends up maybe being a short sale like some of the properties we've bought, or you just wait and see what happens. So nope, they can't. They're not going to sell that. Okay. Well, if you've made the connection with the broker and you stay in touch with them, then when the property does go into foreclosure and the lender figures out what the lender wants to do, because we're finding these days that lenders don't necessarily handle the foreclosure process like they used to. Used to be they'd talk to you a little bit, they'd start the foreclosure process, they'd move through it. Nowadays, you don't really know what the lender's going to do, because the lender may not only doesn't want the property, but maybe they don't want to take it through the foreclosure process, or maybe they're weighing that particular property out against all the other assets that they've got that are in trouble, and they've got their people busy working on these other assets, and there's properties out that are just kind of in limbo land right now. So it's very interesting. So being able to do that quick review is important to be able to do. Number 3, coming up with different funding options. This afternoon we're going to get into talking about creative ways to structure commercial deals. And right now in the marketplace, the funding that was available several years ago is no longer available for commercial properties. And some people look at that and say, oh, that's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing because when you have an owner who is in a situation where they need to sell, or where you have an owner who's passed on and you're dealing with the heirs in an estate, or where you have a property where they 5 years ago signed a note that had a 5-year balloon on it, and they need to refinance that property, and they can't get the funding in one of those situations that they need to sell the property the way that a lot of times you would just put a commercial property in the marketplace and a broker would take it and they'd find someone that had the 10 or maybe 20% down, and the lender would provide the rest of the money and the deal would close. It's not happening in today's marketplace. What that opens up is many, many opportunities to get owners to carry back financing, get owners to participate in the deal, situations where maybe you don't necessarily take title to the property right away. You might control the property with an option, or by leasing the property, oftentimes with an option to buy that property. And through using a variety of techniques, create a situation where you can handle the property or get the property owner what they need to get, while from your end as the investor you end up getting something that's very beneficial to you, which is being able to go in and put a deal together without having to go out and buy it the traditional way. Okay? So traditional way for commercial properties has always been 20% down, get a loan for the rest. In better times, there have been programs or loans or situations where you could maybe get a commercial property with as little as 10% down. These days in this marketplace, those of you who have been out talking to lenders, you're hearing the exact same thing that I'm hearing. 25, 30% down for a good property. If it's a property that's in trouble and is what we call a value add property, which is what we actually like, then that might be what they would tell you that they would offer when you first call them, but then once they get to see the property and get to know it, then they're either not interested in all, or they're looking at more of 40 or 50% down. So how do you overcome that hurdle is one of the main reasons that all of us are here, because all you need is one or two deals like that where you find a way over that hurdle, and then you're basically set with that property. So knowing your funding options. The other part of step number 3 there is when you're looking at your way into the property, also taking a look at your exit strategies. How are you going to get out of the property? How long are you going to be in the property? Step number 4 is something we call the instant offer system. And the instant offer system is a 5-step system that we walk through with a broker or with an owner of a property that allows us to, on average, do a better job of getting the deal put in place. It's not a magic wand. It doesn't make it where someone's going to automatically agree to the crazy offer we put together, but it increases your odds of getting deals accepted. Step number 5 is going through the due diligence and closing the property. Very important to do. Frustrating at times for some of us where you go out and you look and look and look and you think you've got a great deal, and then you go through the due diligence process and you find out that, well, their numbers don't really quite match up, which we expect that. But if you go through the due diligence process and find out that the income that you were counting on to have that deal be a great deal turns out to where it gets to be a good deal, and then you dig a little further, and then it's just like, well, why are we even buying this? So the downside of the due diligence is it can be a little disappointing sometimes. The good side to the due diligence process is I would much rather find that out before I buy a property than find out after you buy a property. So step number 6 is adding value. How are you going to add value to a property? One of my all-time favorite methods is simply finding a property where the rents are low and going in and raising those rents up to market rates. You're increasing the income from the property. Anytime you increase the income that the property produces, you're increasing the value of the property. Number 7 is the final step where you're going to either convert that to cash, where you take the benefits of your efforts in getting the training here and in other places on an ongoing basis, and take that money and pay the taxes on it and take your family on a nice cruise and do some other things. If you're me, probably investing some of that money in another deal. That's what I like. Joanna and I have that conversation all the time. I want to take everything we make and put it back into real estate. And she says, what use is it making all this money if you can't spend some of it, and we can't go on good vacations, and she wants to put a second story in the house right now. And so I just have a hard time doing the due diligence on that process, because I look at the rate of return of the money it would take for the second story and figure out what we could do with that. So I don't really need a second story. Could we put any space up there that we could rent out? It doesn't. So either cashing out or taking that existing project, and some of the deals you get into are just deals that you'll keep for a very long time, or taking what you've made in that one deal and moving that over into the next deal in a wise fashion. Many of you are familiar with 1031 tax deferred exchanges. We're not going to get into those here at this training, but it's interesting sometimes when you see people who will do one of those and they'll buy the wrong property just to save money on their taxes. So they've rushed along or hurried or gotten into a spot where they end up taking what was a good move and taking some of that equity and moving it maybe into some place where it's either not working as well as it could, or where they're potentially losing some of that equity that they built up. And the biggest thing is getting into situations and making sure that you have your options open, which is one of the reasons we like to plan our exit strategies out of a property as we're going into the property. The other thing that I like especially about doing creative investing is that with creative investing, oftentimes you will have properties out there that you control with a lease and an option to purchase. Typically, not always, but typically that option can be exercised at any point in time. One of the nice things about having properties like that in your portfolio is when you are selling a property and you do want to do a 1031 exchange into another property, you can find your other properties to go into, and if you can't find one of those, or if you can't close, or if you have a problem with that, you can take that deal and close on your master lease property that maybe you weren't planning on cashing out the owner of that property for another couple years. But if you've got that property and you're controlling with a lease, you're going in, improving it, you're raising the rents, you're going to take title to that property at some point anyways, you can take that money out of that property you sold, go ahead and close on the property that you control with a master lease, which is a very nice way, which check with your advisors, but meets the tax code requirements to where you defer your gain on that, and then that gives you a place to basically park that money while you go out and look for the next deal. Okay? So there are the 7 steps to success.